And the hard thing is all of these changes, all of these decisions are tied to a human on the back end. So the easiest way to figure out if you actually have a person issue is when you start talking about someone, if you have to justify why they're so nice, they're trying so hard, she's so sweet. If any of those qualifiers happen before the performance of that person, they're probably not doing their job appropriately. Because if you truly like that person, you'll want them to be better because everybody wants to be better eventually. It just may be 6 months to a year from now when you have to fire them. So it's much better to give them an option to actually save their job. And so the way we look at rehab CEOs is we're really like a navigation system. You're here, you want to be here. I'm going to show you the fastest line to be here. So that's how we do our business. We make suggestions, you make decisions. But we're always going to tell you the fastest way to get there, and then it's your decision to see if you want to go that way. And then if you take a detour, then we'll find the fastest way from there. And so it's very easy to fall into I need more volume if you don't know other ways to fix it. And then you kind of feel like you get disenfranchised with like, I don't even know if I like the PT profession anymore. That's when I hear people saying like, I just want to have an all cash model. I want to start adding functional medicine. I want to start adding weight loss or red light therapy or this. And usually when I hear those things, it's not because the person's truly that passionate about it. Or if they were, like realistically, just make your PT profitable, then add those things. Like it shouldn't be your saving grace to add these specific things. Otherwise, we have a fundamental business issue. Like, yeah, they're trying to run an easy example of this. In the gym industry, a lot of people will try to model the 24-hour fitness, the Planet Fitness, the Anytime Fitness, all of these things because they're big, it must work. In reality, what happens is they have so much freaking money, they can lose money for 3 to 6 months and be okay with it. So your mom and pop ones try to model what the big guys do, which is what happens in physical therapy. They try to model these people who have enough bankroll to do that. And you end up losing because you can't do the same model as them. Or you try to model someone up in Washington whose average reimbursement's 160, when in reality, you're in New Jersey where your average reimbursement's like 85 if you're lucky. And so there's different models for each state, and there's different models even within states. Like if you're in St. Louis, your Blue Cross Blue Shield pays really crappy compared to your Kansas City. So like people unfortunately are trying to help. So someone says, hey, should I take this or should I do this in my business in a random Facebook group? And people try to, again, hammer with the only hammer they know, the experience they've had. They're trying to help someone. They're like, oh, well, you actually shouldn't take Blue Cross Blue Shield. It's terrible. When in reality, it may be terrible where they are, or they're underbilling. They were told by a cash guru that it's easier to do cash-based than Blue Cross Blue Shield because they were only doing 95 average reimbursement for Blue Cross Blue Shield. And so they cut Blue Cross Blue Shield. They had 7 therapists. They went down to 4 because they couldn't keep them full. Little did they know, it actually wasn't a Blue Cross Blue Shield issue. It was they weren't billing Blue Cross Blue Shield appropriately. In Texas, Blue Cross Blue Shield's like $135 to $140 a visit. So they were billing inefficiently and then told by someone else that that was the wrong thing. And so a lot of the times we default to things as what we think are the solution, but we're solving the wrong thing. Like if you think you know what the actual problem is and it hasn't been solved, it's probably not the problem. Like if I think I have a marketing issue and I've tried all these marketing things and they don't work, I probably don't actually have a marketing issue. I probably have a systems or a people or a front office or a provider issue. If I think I have like a profitability issue, we need to just actually look at like, do we actually have a leadership issue? Do we have a structure issue? Is it really just the fact that we're getting low reimbursement from a couple of these people? Or is it because we don't have good enough operations to fix some of that? And the hard thing is all of these changes, all of these decisions are tied to a human on the back end. So the easiest way to figure out if you actually have a person issue is when you start talking about someone, if you have to justify why they're so nice, they're trying so hard, she's so sweet. If any of those qualifiers happen before the performance of that person, they're probably not doing their job appropriately. And you're having a hard time having that hard conversation because you genuinely like that person. And that's okay to like your people, but it's not okay. And it actually doesn't serve you or the company to sugarcoat any of that. Because if you truly like that person, you'll want them to be better because everybody wants to be better. I've never met someone who says, I want to be worse at my job. I want to be a worse human being. So you're actually not serving them by not having that conversation, because you'll have that conversation with them eventually. It just may be 6 months to a year from now when you have to fire them. So it's much better to give them an option to actually save their job. So that is why you have to get into some of this, because like being a PT mill is very easy to run into that if you think that that's the only thing you can do to solve it. But there's 100 other ways to do it. People should like to work for you. Patients should want to come with you. You do not have to stack 3, 4, 5 patients on top of each other. Like, that is not a model that you have to do. It's like, we were asked the other day by someone, why don't y'all double book these commercials here? It's like, well, we don't have to. Like, our goal almost all the time is like, how do we maximize profit while also maximizing work-life balance of therapists? So like, there's a lot of times people could do 30-minute scheduling and we'll actually push to 40-minute scheduling, because we know that's a competitive advantage for hiring. Like, again, I've never met a therapist who says, I want to see more evals and I want to see more visits. Like, no one's ever said that. And so if we can use that to our advantage, that'll allow us to have a lot better options for someone to want to work, and we won't kind of fall into this PT mill trap. Because no one wants to be a PT mill. It's just they don't feel like there's another option. Yeah, I mean, it's it's efficiency. Like that's all we're looking for. Because like, no one really looks at Chick-fil-A and says that's a mill. Like, they don't. Chick-fil-A never gets compared to McDonald's being similar. But it's arguably Chick-fil-A actually runs a tighter mill, if you want to say the word mill, than McDonald's. But one is seen as a premium for a fast food place versus like, the only reason people go here is because like they have nothing better and their kids want to go there and they want to let them play on the playground to get a little bit of time away from them. That's the only reason people go to McDonald's. Yeah, I mean, you get what you pay for. And I think that's the thing. But I think the thing is, people think that you can't have high quality. They think insurance is synonymous with poor quality care. They think cash is synonymous with good quality care. I say it's bullshit to both, because I have met a ton of insurance-based clinics that crush results. I've met a lot of cash-based clinics that suck. And it's the other way around, because you have to think about it. Statistically, 50% of your cash-based clinics are the worst cash-based clinics. Same with insurance. So someone has to be the bottom half. As much as we all want to think we're above average, someone has to be the bottom half. And that's a tough pill to swallow, but most people aren't even tracking enough metrics for them to know if they're the bottom half. Like, if I ask therapists, what's your graduation rate? So people that come in for an eval and actually get to the goal of graduating with whatever result we're talking about, successfully discharging, almost no one knows that number. Very, very rare. National average? 8%. Yeah, it's 8 or 9. It's 8 or 9. I can't remember. It's awful. And it's like, some of that's just because like we didn't actually delineate that was a discharge. Of course we know some of that. But there's a lot of people, they just ghosted her. Like, oh yeah, Susan's good. Like, is she? Yeah, it's not good. I'm saying that's why like people who don't want to sell, I'm like, you kind of always are like, always be selling. Like that's pretty much where you have to be. Like, it's either selling your team, it's selling your spouse, it's selling your patients why they need to come, why they need to do their home exercise program, why continuing to pay their copay is worth it. You're always selling something. So you always have to be doing that. Otherwise, your drop-offs, your length of stay is going to be terrible. Your graduation's terrible. But I have all these people who track all kinds of numbers. They can tell me their length of stay on average, but they can't tell me how many people graduate. Like that's like a surgeon saying like, on average, it takes us 4 days to do this whole process of doing the imaging. We're going to have them come in. We're going to do the surgery. Well, how many of them actually live after you're done? I don't know. Who cares? They came in those 4 days. Like that's the essentially, it's like, I don't understand it. Like we don't track it. And I don't know if it's just because like the actual like ability to do that, again, that's just operationally hard, or there's this weird, like, a patient never graduates from us. They keep working with us forever. Like, I get the whole wellness and we want to treat our body like it's like a tune-up session. Everybody goes every 6 months to the dentist and stuff like that. But like, we have to have a delineation. Otherwise, like, people just be like, yeah, I've been in therapy for 7 months. I guess it's okay. Like, so we have to have that delineation. We have to push towards graduation, because that's the only thing that matters. Like, it's literally the only thing that matters. Everybody's like, oh, I'm worried about branding. I'm worried about branding. I need to do my social media posts. Like, none of that matters. Are we getting results for people? Are we highlighting that by doing graduation day photos? And do we get good 5-star reviews? That's literally your brand. Do we get results? Do we have good customer service? Do people want to show up and actually be a patient? Do people want to show up and actually be an employee? Like, that's brand at the local level. Brand is not, are my TikTok videos good? Like, The world doesn't need another shoulder external rotation video. Like they really don't. And only 2% of the people who follow you on Facebook actually see your post. Like it's a waste of time. And so that's where people's focus needs to be. The hard thing is it's soft skills are significantly harder to track. And that's why people, I think, don't put as much effort into it. But like that's literally the difference between big businesses and small businesses is they've found a way to formalize the training of soft skills. So soft skills are the things that get people to make connections, to get people to communicate well, to get them to actually finish their plan of care when they don't want to because they're having a bad day. They got sick and prioritized something else over that. They decided to make a bad decision and we didn't know how to communicate why that wouldn't be good for them long-term based on the goals they told you. Leadership is almost all soft skills. Yes, there's metrics and stuff that help you track some of that, but it's all soft. It's just not sexy. That's why you don't hear anybody that's, oh, KPIs. KPIs don't matter. Like systems don't matter. Like that was one of the big things from one of our mentors. It's like everybody's talking about like, oh, are you using this specific software? What are you using for operations here? What are you using here? It's just like, well, like realistically, none of that matters. Everybody's like, what do you mean? Well, like if you can't actually talk to someone and show them the importance of why they need to put in all those metrics, then every system will break. Which is like the main people that I actually look up to and the people that I learned all of my operations stuff from weren't people who ran businesses. He goes, I study psychologists because if we can get people to do the things that we want them to do, that's how you build big businesses. But until you understand what makes people tick and how to get them to do things that you need them to and incentivize them, reward them and praise them and make them understand that maybe it's more work in the micro, but it's less work in the macro. Every single CRM, every single EMR, every single KPI you're tracking, all of that will end up falling eventually. All of your billing when you try to get people to bill better. And then you're like, they did really good for 2 weeks. I feel like I have to teach them every month. It's like, yeah, you do. Because they don't inherently understand why it's important. And if new habits were easy to create, we wouldn't have an obesity epidemic. We'd all be jacked. We'd all be super smart. We'd all be playing every instrument we've ever said we wanted to play. So like, if it's that hard to do things we want, imagine how hard it is to get someone to change the things that they don't even care about. That's why business is hard. It's not that like, oh, this big company knows all these things. It's just they are able to attract people that naturally learn faster and change their patterns faster, or they know how to facilitate it. Or if you can do both, then you're just going to blow up. Like that's business. I always use the analogy of like if you're going to the dentist and they want to pull your tooth and they're like, what do you mean it's $800 for you to pull my tooth? They're like, well, I can take 30 minutes if you want. No one's ever like, yep, let's do that. And so when you actually look at like the affluent, they actually want everything to be done in less time because they understand the importance of time and it's more valuable than money. And so like I've never met someone who is very, very, very wealthy who said, you know, I'd really rather work out for 60 minutes at the gym if I could get the same results in 40. I've never met someone who said, I want to work out 7 days a week. They may be obsessive and they do it because they think it's necessary and they over optimize everything in their life. But like, there's significantly like other things that they are showing that time is of value. Like that's why like most of your very wealthy, they have food prep services or they don't literally cook anything. They have someone in-house for maid services. They have someone who mows their lawn. And so it shows you every action they take in their daily life is I value time more than I value money. And so if we can get the same result in less time, the issue is, and I say this, of course, I've only treated so much, but I've talked to enough therapists at this point. The reason people think they need 60 minutes, there's only 2 reasons. One is because they just don't want to see more than 8 people a day. It's actually them who want 60 minutes. The other is the fact that they actually maybe aren't good as a therapist as they think they are. And they kind of have to spray and pray with extra exercises, extra everything, and hope that something lands. And so I find that the more experienced and the longer a therapist has been around, the shorter amount of time they say they need with a patient. There's a direct correlation. I've seen it over and over and over again. And it's not like, oh, I want to see more volume. Again, they don't want, no one wants to see more volume, but they see that they can get the same results. And it like anybody who thinks someone wants 60 minutes, every one of your patients at some point has told you they don't want 60 minutes. They look at their watch and then they say, how much more time do we have on that? No one asks that if they want to stay longer. Like never. Like I've never asked that when I'm getting a massage. I'm like, hey, how much more? I'm just like, I'm just going to relax and hope they're good. And I'm just going to like bask in this. Like, it doesn't happen. And so they're telling you, you're just maybe not listening. And to be clear though, we do 60-minute sessions, but every 40 minutes someone comes in, unless it's like a federal payer, because you have to do one-on-one. So there is some overlap there. So like I can't get too heavy in there, but like if we're looking at the like true clinical one-on-one time, you don't need more than that. You don't. And the other analogy I typically get into is like, hey, like imagine you go to like a 5-star restaurant and it's just you and you cook, the chef comes out and he just watches you take every bite. That's 60-minute one-on-one. You having a little bit of overlap is you actually having someone with you and he's there a little bit to kind of show you some of the things and kind of walk you through the things, but like you have someone else. There's a little bit of overlap. Like if you've ever been in a facility that's not 60-minute one-on-one, all your patients talk to each other. They enjoy talking to each other. They're like, hey, like, how's your knee going? Hey, I know last time you said this. Like, they're excited to talk with each other, and it builds a different vibe, a different atmosphere. The easiest way to think about that is there's a lot of people that have never done it because it's so weird, but I've done it once and I said I'd never do it again. I went and saw a movie by myself. So I used to work at a movie theater. I was like, I'm just going to go watch this. No one right now is available. I'm just going to go watch this movie. It's weird. Like, you go watch a movie and you look over because you're used to like laughing with the person. You don't realize how much like just head nods of like back to the other person when you're watching it, that it's super weird when you watch by yourself. And so like that's what happens when you're 60-minute one-on-one. It's weird. Where if you have a little bit of overlap, you kind of have that like that. That's what you do. Very different atmosphere. There's also the one that Alex did a video on that like fucking hammered it really hard. It's like all these people, they want a 7-figure clinic or a 7-figure gym. And we always hear like, well, I feel like all Gym Launch wants me to do is sell all day. And it's like, well, fucking yeah. It's like the numbers show that's all you have to do. Like if you want this and you do this, like you have to. And so I think there's some of that we could kind of hit on here. It's like people are like a little bit worried there. And so like if we set expectations a little bit harder there, I think that we can kind of do. It's like all they care about is us wanting to like track our numbers and our metrics and all that. It's like, yeah, like I don't build business based on subjectivity. Like your emotions will pretty much always lead you astray. Like that's why you are where you are. And so if we want to get somewhere new, we've got to be looking at it differently. The bigger businesses I talk with, the more metrics they track, but typically the bigger shit show they are because they're tracking everything, but they don't know what's important and they don't know how to change it if it's not right. And so metrics all day are awesome. It's like in Facebook ads, we can look at your CPMs and that tells you essentially how much you can actually pay for 1,000 eyeballs. There's only so many ways you can really change that. But like if that's all we're basing everything off of, or like someone would be like, oh, my click-through rate's 3%. Like that's cool and all, but like your cost per lead's actually like, or it's like my click-through rate's like 0.1%. I'm like, oh, that normally you'd be like, that sucks. But if you actually look at it, sometimes you see some of these like 1% click-through rates and it's like the lowest cost per lead out of all your stuff. And you have a 5% click-through rate and it's like super high cost per lead. And so like people are only looking at some of these. Again, it's usually people look at the ones they're most familiar with. We always hit with the same hammer. And so they look at everything of I need more new patients, or they look at it as our length of stay assist. They're not looking at graduation. They're not seeing like, hey, we're actually not getting any reviews, even though we've been in business for 20 years. Why is that? And so we're looking at the wrong things, or we just collect all these things and do nothing with it. Like that's like when I won't get into who, but I was talking to someone and they work for a very, very big business. And every single quarter, every single year, they always do surveys to ask them feedback and everything. And when I was talking to them, they're like, I don't know why they freaking do these because they never change anything based on these anyways. So the more things you track, the more feedback you get from your staff, but then don't change actually causes more of an issue than not even giving a shit about the metrics. That's the issue, is people track all these things and then they don't know what to do with it. They don't know how to show the importance of it. So then these people start to resent the fact they have to do it because they don't know why. Like as a leader, you have to spend way more time on why someone needs to do something than how to do it. Because if they're not sold on it, it will never happen. And that's why selling is so important in every aspect. Like if for you, and like if you're like, let's use sales. For me, if I don't do my end of day notes or I do my ring the bell when someone comes in, it's a pain in the ass to do those. But if I don't do that, then onboarding doesn't know what they need to know. Coaching doesn't know what they need to know. Go high level team doesn't need to know. Facebook doesn't know what they need to know. So it's more work in the micro, less in the macro. So if I didn't understand the importance of that, I'd be like, hey, it's not a big deal. Hey, tracking all of our metrics every week, it sounds like a lot of work, but it allows us to do this. is why it's important. That's how we start to do it, because if there's not a why attached to the metric, they won't track it, or they won't even really make the changes we need to. But almost every time, the people that track a shit ton of metrics are tracking the wrong things. Like, I've had people come in and they're like dialed with some of these metrics, but their company's not set up right. It was like, cool, you're tracking all these things, but you're still not making money. Yeah. Well, it's because they don't know how to fix the actual real issue. If you know what the issue is and it hasn't changed, it's probably not the issue. Like that every single time. It's either it's not the issue or there's something going on to where you don't want to make that change. So there's a subconscious thing that's making you not want to make the change. And so sometimes that's for someone that, like, they're wanting to be in network. They want to maintain 60-minute one-on-one, but they're at a 95 average reimbursement. There's no math that'll ever make that math. So their beliefs of treatment philosophy are more important than making money. And that's okay, as long as you're okay not making money. So that's why, like, so many times we've had it time and time again where someone's 6 months to a year with us in a program. We'll have people that are in a program for 6 months to a year, and they'll know they need to make changes on their scheduling, and they don't do it because no matter what, the math ain't mathin'. Like, there's no way they could make that average reimbursement with that scheduling make sense from a profitability standpoint. But then eventually they're like, okay, there's nothing else we can do here, because they don't want to go out of network because maybe they're afraid of that in some of those. So then they finally make the change, and then they realize, like, the time it took for them to actually decide to make the change is less than the time it takes to actually fix it. And so there's that. Or we've got our guys. I have someone right now. He's been with me for 2.5 years, die hard cash, and he finally leans in and says, I think I'm going to start taking Blue Cross Blue Shield. Wasted 2.5 years of growth. So I always tell people, if you're thinking, hey, when I get to X, then I'll make the change, just make the fucking change. Like, you're fighting for a limiting belief. And if you do, you're going to keep it. So, like, whether that's, I'll take Medicare once I get to 3 or 4 PTs. I had someone in Florida. They're like, when I get to $1 million all cash, then I'll maybe consider taking Medicare. And I just kind of leaned in. I was like, well, why wait till then? Well, I mean, I don't know. It'd be really cool to do that. And I'm like, that's cool and all, but, like, once you do that, what'll happen? Are you just gonna, like, go tell all of your other cash-based buddies, like, I did it, and then, like, they'll not give a shit a week later? I said, or would you rather maybe take a Medicare, maybe start doing out-of-network billing, and have more profit than all of them have in revenue? And he's the one that said it. He said, maybe it's just kind of like an ego thing, because, like, I know it's hard and I just want to do it. Like, I don't really know anybody that's done it. Okay, that's fine. Like, acknowledging that's why you're doing it. If that's why you're doing it and you still want to do it, that's okay. But doing it for the reasons you thought you were doing it for versus realizing it's just a selfish, I want to actually just do it for myself to prove that I can do it, that's fine. I'm all for that if that's what you want to do, as long as you know that's why you're doing it. But it's when it's the facade of, like, oh, I don't want to do that because of this. It's going to change my treatment philosophy. It's going to do these things. And, like, in reality, we know it's not. Usually it's actually because we're scared of taking insurance because we don't know it. There's uncertainty. People don't like change. And so that's why a lot of people, when they go from, like, being a mill, they typically go cash-based. It's because they're afraid that they either have to do exactly the same way they did it. So their model of the world is like, you have to be like XYZ chain and you have to say stupid volume. And so that's their model of the world and how insurance works. So they don't want to do that. So they go the opposite extreme. They're cash-based. And I always tell people there's really only 2 options. It's, we're going to have to learn how to market and sell very heavily if we're cash-based, or we're going to have to learn a little bit more about operations and billing. And you don't have to be anywhere near as good at marketing and sales. Both have problems. Both have pros and cons. Which problem would you rather solve? And I'll tell you, it's much easier to learn how to bill in operations than learn to market and sell if we want to get to a ton of therapists. If you want to stay at 2 or 3, being an orthopedic clinic, and when I say 2 or 3, it's not like PTs, I'm talking actual FTEs, then stay cash if you're fine with that. But if you're like, I want to open 5 clinics and I want to crush, I want to get out of treatment as fast as possible, all those, it probably makes sense to take a couple insurances. There's some states like Florida, like, you're pretty much only going to do Medicare if you're starting out, because most of their in-network stuff is locked out and you can't be in it and it sucks. But, like, there's some states where, like, you may actually take 4 or 5 insurances because it's actually good, but everybody in Facebook groups have told you it's bad. And so you just have to figure out why you want to do it first. And then from there, you figure out, is 60-minute one-on-one our goal, or is getting outcomes for our patients the goal? They don't have to be one. Like, you can have one without the other. And so from there, you model, it's like, this is how I want my treatment schedule to look like. This is how many visits I want to be. And from there, you either say this will be how much in network I am or out of network. And then that's pretty much how you figure it out. But if you're like, I want to get to 10 therapists, you're going to have a harder time doing it out with some models. And so the way we look at rehab CEOs is we're really like a navigation system. You're here. You want to be here. I'm going to show you the fastest line to be here. You may say, no, I actually want to take the scenic route. I actually want to go here, learn my way, AKA different model, different treatment philosophy, different marketing, different stuff like that. I'm okay with that. It's you have to be okay with it taking longer because we know this is the fastest path. So we're going to go here and be like, hey, you actually need to consider taking a left here because this is still the fastest way to get up here. So that's how we do our business. We make suggestions, you make decisions, but we're always going to tell you the fastest way to get there. And then it's your decision to see if you want to go that way. And then if you take a detour, then we'll find the fastest way from there.